The door that changed everything. The security guard's hand was still on B.B. King's chest. When the silence began, not the comfortable silence of a recording studio waiting for music to begin, not the expectant quiet of an audience holding its breath before the first note. This was the silence of a moment balanced on a razor's edge, where one man's dignity would either bend or break, and everyone watching would remember which way it went. It was March 15th, 1956, and B.B. King was standing at the white entrance of WMCA radio station in Memphis, Tennessee. Behind him, Lucille waited in her case. Ahead of him, a door that might as well have been a brick wall. The guard's name was Patterson, and he'd been working this door for 8 years without a single black person trying to walk through it. His hand pressed firmly against BB's chest, not violently, but with the kind of certainty that comes from never having to question the rules. "Colored entrances around back," Patterson said, his voice carrying the tired authority of a man who'd said these words 1,000 times before. B.B. King was 27 years old and had been making music professionally for 6 years. He'd played every juke joint from Mississippi to Missouri, every hole-in-the-wall club where the music mattered more than the color of the man making it. He'd performed in joints where the floorboards sagged under the weight of dancing couples, where the smell of whiskey and cigarettes mixed with the sound of Lucille's strings, places where white folks sometimes came to listen from the back of the room, drawn by music that transcended the boundaries society had drawn for it. But this was different. This was Memphis radio. This was WMCA's afternoon show, broadcast to 200,000 people across the Mid-South, white families in their living rooms, farmers in their trucks, secretaries on their lunch breaks. This was his chance to reach beyond the Chitlin circuit and touch something bigger, to prove that blues wasn't just music for black folks in juke joints, but music for anyone who'd ever felt pain, love, or loss. He'd been invited here. That was the part that made this moment so particular. 3 days earlier, Jimmy Sullivan, WMCA's program director, had called BB personally. Not his manager, not his record label. BB himself, at home, during dinner with his wife Martha, who nearly choked on her cornbread when he told her who was on the phone. "Mr. King," Sullivan had said, his voice crackling through the phone line, "we'd like to have you on our afternoon program this Thursday. Live performance, 20-minute segment. We've been hearing good things about your music." The call had come because of Robert Henry, a young white DJ who'd been playing BB's records on the late-night shift. Henry had been getting requests, letters, phone calls from listeners asking about that guitar player who makes Lucille sing. When Henry brought it to Sullivan's attention, the program director had made a business decision. Good music drew listeners, listeners drew advertisers. It was simple mathematics. But the mathematics of Jim Crow radio were more complicated. BB had almost dropped the phone. WMCA was white radio, clean, professional, mainstream. The kind of station that played Perry Como and Tony Bennett, not some blues guitarist from Indianola, Mississippi. The kind of station his own people sometimes tuned to when they wanted to hear respectable music. The kind white folks approved of. "You sure about that, Mr. Sullivan?" BB had asked. "Dead sure. You're good for business, Mr. King. Music is music." The 3 days between the phone call and today had been a whirlwind of preparation. BB had called his friend Sonny Boy Williamson for advice. "Play what you play best," Sonny Boy had said. "Don't try to be something you ain't for white radio." They invited B.B. King, not some watered-down version of him. BB had picked out his best shirt, pressed it twice. He'd spent an hour polishing Lucille's body until it gleamed. He'd practiced his speaking voice, the words he might use to introduce his songs to an audience that might be hearing blues for the first time. Now, standing at this door with Patterson's hand on his chest, BB was beginning to understand that music being music and business being business were two different things entirely. "I'm expected," BB said quietly. "Mr. Sullivan invited me for the afternoon show." Patterson looked confused for a moment. He glanced back through the glass doors at the lobby, where white people in suits moved with purpose between the elevators and the reception desk. "You got a letter or something?" Patterson asked. BB reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a piece of WMCA letterhead. Sullivan's signature at the bottom, the date and time clearly typed. Patterson took the letter, read it twice, then handed it back with a frown. "Letter don't change the rules," Patterson said. "Colored entrance is around back, that's how it works. Even for invited guests, especially for invited guests." B.B. King stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of this decision. He could walk around back, use the service entrance like so many before him, get to the studio, do the show, collect his fee, and go home. No fuss, no trouble, no waves. But something in him had shifted in the 3 days since Sullivan's phone call. For 72 hours, BB had been imagining what it would feel like to walk through the front door of a major radio station as an equal, to be announced as a guest, not a novelty, to have his music treated with the same respect given to any other professional artist. The door behind Patterson opened, and Jimmy Sullivan emerged. He was a thin, nervous man in his 30s, wearing a gray suit and thick glasses. When he saw the scene unfolding at his front door, King with his guitar case, Patterson with his hand extended like a traffic cop, his face went pale. "Mr. King," Sullivan said, his voice pitched higher than it had been on the phone. "There you are. Patterson, what's the problem here?" "No problem, Mr. Sullivan. Just directing this gentleman to the appropriate entrance." Sullivan looked from BB to Patterson, and BB could see the calculation happening behind the program director's eyes. The mathematics of Jim Crow radio. The delicate balance between wanting good music and maintaining social order. "Right," Sullivan said slowly. "Mr. King, if you could just—" "Mr. Sullivan," BB interrupted, his voice quiet but clear, "I was invited to be a guest on your program. I've driven 40 miles to be here. I am prepared to perform for your audience and represent your station professionally." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I'm asking to be treated as you would treat any other professional musician you've invited to perform." The silence that followed was the kind that changes things. Not just the immediate moment, but the trajectory of everything that comes after. Sullivan looked at BB, then at Patterson, then back at BB. Other people were starting to notice. A secretary coming back from lunch stopped to watch. Two men in suits paused their conversation to observe. Through the glass doors, BB could see people in the lobby turning their heads toward the entrance. This was becoming something more than a simple matter of which door to use. "The thing is," Sullivan said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, "we have procedures, ways of doing things that work for everyone." "Who's everyone?" BB asked. It was a simple question, asked without anger or accusation. Just curiosity about whose comfort mattered when those procedures were established. Sullivan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at BB King, really looked at him, for the first time since the phone call 3 days earlier. Took in the pressed white shirt, the black tie, the polished shoes, the guitar case that held an instrument worth more than most people's monthly salary, the quiet dignity of a man who'd driven 40 miles for the privilege of giving his music to Sullivan's audience. "You know what?" Sullivan said finally. "You're right." He turned to Patterson. "Mr. King is my guest. He'll be using the front entrance." Patterson's face hardened. "Mr. Sullivan, the rules are my responsibility." Sullivan cut him off. "Mr. King, please come in." BB King walked through that door, and everything that happened after would be different because of it. The lobby of WMCA was smaller than BB had imagined, but more impressive. The walls were lined with photographs of radio personalities and visiting celebrities. Perry Como shaking hands with the station manager, Tony Bennett at a microphone, Frank Sinatra laughing with the DJ staff. By tomorrow, there would be a photograph of BB King on that wall, too. Sullivan led him to the elevator, making nervous small talk about the weather and the drive from BB's home. But BB could see something had changed in the program director's demeanor. The phone call 3 days ago had been business. This was something else. This was Sullivan realizing that the voice he'd admired enough to book belonged to a person who deserved the same respect he'd give to any other artist. On the 3rd floor, they passed through a hallway lined with offices and recording rooms. Through an open door, BB could see the main broadcast studio, where the afternoon DJ was spinning records and chatting into a microphone. "We'll put you in Studio B," Sullivan said. "It's got better acoustics for live performance. The microphones are more sensitive." Studio B was pristine. Professional equipment, sound baffles on the walls, a piano in the corner. This wasn't some makeshift setup in the basement. This was where the station recorded its premium content. "You'll have 20 minutes, Sullivan said. "Talk a bit about your music, play 3 songs, maybe take a call or 2 if they come in. Think you can handle that?" BB smiled. "I've been handling audiences since I was 16, Mr. Sullivan. I think I can manage." "Right. Of course." Sullivan paused at the door. "Mr. King, I want you to know what happened downstairs. That won't happen again. Not at my station. I appreciate that. I mean it. Music is music. Talent is talent. The rest of it," Sullivan gestured vaguely, encompassing the whole complicated world of racial protocol that surrounded them. "The rest of it doesn't belong in here." BB King set up his equipment while Sullivan returned to his office. Lucille came out of her case looking perfect. As always, he tuned each string carefully, checking the microphone levels, adjusting his chair until everything felt right. At 3:30 p.m., The red light above the door switched on, and B.B. King was broadcasting live to 200,000 people across the Mid-South. "Good afternoon, Memphis," came the announcer's voice over the studio speakers. "This is WMCA, and we have something special for you today. In our studio is Mr. B.B. King, one of the most exciting blues artists working today. Mr. King, welcome to WMCA." "Thank you for having me," B.B. said into the microphone. "It's an honor to be here. Tell us a little about your music." B.B. looked through the studio window at the handful of staff members who had gathered to watch. Sullivan stood among them, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "Well," B.B. said, "I play what I feel. Some folks call it blues. Some call it rhythm and blues. I just call it music that comes from the heart. Every song tells a story, and every story is true, even when you make it up." He started with 3 o'clock blues, letting Lucille speak the opening notes while his voice found its way into the song. The studio was acoustically perfect, and B.B. could hear every nuance of the performance in his headphones. Clean, professional, powerful. Through the window, he could see the staff members nodding along. Not politely, not out of obligation, but because the music was undeniable. The phone started ringing during the second song. Not one call, but several. The lights on the phone blinking in sequence. Through the window, B.B. could see a secretary frantically taking messages. By the third song, "Sweet Little Angel," the phones were ringing continuously. When the performance ended, Sullivan came back into the studio with a stack of message slips. "Mr. King," he said, his voice filled with something between amazement and confusion, "we've taken 47 phone calls in the last 20 minutes. 47. Do you know what our usual call volume is for the afternoon show?" B.B. shook his head. 2 or 3, maybe 5 on a good day. Sullivan looked down at the message slips. "These aren't all, they're not all positive. Some people are angry that we have you on the air. And the others want to know when you're coming back." Sullivan sat down across from B.B. The message slips spread between them like cards on a table. "Mr. King, I've been in radio for 8 years. I thought I understood my audience. I thought I knew what they wanted to hear." He gestured toward the phones, which were still ringing. "This is something I've never seen before. Music doesn't recognize the same boundaries people do," B.B. said. "Apparently not." Sullivan gathered the message slips. "I want to offer you a regular spot. Once a week, same time slot, 20 minutes every Thursday afternoon. What do you think?" B.B. looked through the studio window at the hallway beyond. He was thinking about Patterson downstairs and the hand on his chest and the door that had almost stayed closed. He was thinking about the 47 phone calls and what they meant for other musicians who looked like him. "I think," B.B. said, "that would depend on which door I'd be expected to use." Sullivan didn't hesitate. "Front door, Mr. King. Every time." The weekly show lasted for 2 years from March 1956 to April 1958. Every Thursday at 3:30 p.m., B.B. King would walk through the front entrance of WMCA radio station, nod to Patterson at the security desk, and take the elevator to Studio B. Patterson's attitude had changed too. What started as begrudging acceptance became genuine respect. By the end of the first year, Patterson would greet B.B. by name, ask about his travels, even request specific songs for his own listening. "My wife heard you play Sweet 16 last week," Patterson would say. "She's been humming it all around the house." The phone calls never stopped. Some weeks brought angry complaints about colored music on a white station. Letters arrived calling Sullivan a race mixer and threatening boycotts that never materialized. But more weeks brought requests for specific songs, invitations to local venues, and questions about where people could buy B.B.'s records. Local record stores reported increased sales of blues albums. Other radio stations in Memphis began cautiously incorporating black artists into their programming. The segregated music landscape that had seemed permanent began showing its first cracks. What changed wasn't just the audience's reaction to B.B. King. What changed was WMCA itself. The staff who had gathered to watch that first performance became regular listeners. The secretary who'd answered 47 phone calls became one of B.B.'s strongest advocates in the building, arguing for extended segments and additional guest spots for other blues artists. Jimmy Sullivan found himself defending decisions he'd never expected to make. When advertisers complained about his programming choices, he showed them ratings. When community leaders questioned the station's direction, he pointed to listener response. When his own board of directors expressed concerns, he played them recordings of B.B.'s performances and let the music speak for itself. By 1957, the station was regularly featuring black artists on its programming, not as novelties or special guests, but as professionals whose music deserved airtime based on its quality. The domino effect rippled through Memphis radio, then throughout the South. Other program directors, seeing WMCA's success, began making their own calls to blues clubs and record labels. Years later, Sullivan would tell interviewers that the afternoon in 1956 when B.B. King refused to use the back door was the moment he realized that segregation wasn't just wrong, it was bad for business. Good music was good business, regardless of who made it. But for B.B. King, the real victory wasn't the radio show or the phone calls or the changes that followed. The real victory was the moment when he chose to stay at that front door. Not because he was angry or because he wanted to make a statement or because he was trying to change the world. He stayed because he understood something fundamental about dignity, that once you let someone define how much respect you deserve, you've given them the power to decide who you are. B.B. King walked through that front door in 1956 as a musician, but he walked out as something more. He walked out as a man who had decided that his music was worth exactly the same respect as anyone else's, and that he would accept nothing less. That decision, made in a moment of silence outside a radio station in Memphis, would echo through every performance for the rest of his career. Every time B.B. King took the stage, he carried with him the understanding that he belonged there, not because someone had granted him permission, but because the music demanded it. The guard's hand eventually moved away from B.B.'s chest. The door eventually opened, and once it opened, it never closed the same way again. That's not just about radio, that's about dignity. Interested?